Once again, this is the Cult of Honesty, and we are dealing with emotions tonight. This is going to be a very interesting hangout. If you get a chance, call your friends, get them involved in tuning in. I think you're going to find that this is going to be extremely therapeutic. If you'd like to make a comment, it's obvious that there is a comment section to the right of your Ustream. So get involved in the conversation. The conversation is going to be really fired up tonight. I'm excited about it. And we may get a chance to talk about the latest video that Ray Comfort put out. It's rather funny, and so we want to make our remarks concerning it possibly at the end of the show. But without hesitation, I want to welcome everyone in the Hangout. Bob, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, having fun. Actually preparing to get even busier myself as the school year is getting ready to start, and I've got my syllabuses to rewrite because some of the things are going to be totally revamped, but I'm happy.
Your show was awesome. I enjoyed all of the content, the substance of talking about emotion. Christopher and I were talking about that before the show, and that's
Cool.
where this show is going tonight. And so without further ado, you guys jump right into it.
Sure. And we have Alexa with us tonight, too. Haven't seen you in a while, so good to have you back.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, we almost thought of you as just a regular here, and so and of course we have with us Daryl, who's just one of our sweet and dear friends from Texas. So Daryl, good to have you with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Now, Chris is the one who suggested that we continue. Hello again. I didn't hear the last thing you said, Daryl.
Oh, I just said good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, Chris brought up the notion that maybe we should continue a discussion about emotions, because this is just an area he has been fascinated in looking at. And you said you've actually done graduate work in the area of music therapy, which of course looks at the impact that music has on us in terms of our well-being, and that's often thought of in terms of our emotional well-being. So that's awesome. How much graduate work did you actually have to do in music therapy?
Well, I did everything to get my master's. The only thing I did not do is finish my thesis. I actually did a thesis on the meaning in music, and I actually did a contrary thesis saying that music does not elicit emotions, based on a very specific definition of what emotions are and a very specific definition of what music was. And my thesis advisor did not like that. And
no kidding. Could I guess? I would wonder if you're saying that music, even music theory, is actually arbitrarily developed in a cultural sense and is not automatically and mathematically tied to the music itself. Is that where you're going?
I was going somewhere with that. I was going somewhere close to that. I was saying
I would totally agree with it too, because it sounds right to me.
Music does not elicit what we would consider the garden variety emotions. So very similar to what you were talking about in your last show, how we perceive stimuli through appraisals, which are cognitive. And the end result of that cognitive appraisal is a physiological response that we, through a feedback loop, recognize, reappraise as an emotion.
Sure, right.
Right? That would be one of the models that runs contrary to the James Lang theory, who say that we have a physiological response and then we appraise it as an emotion, right? So the James Lang theory would say we are sad because we cry, as compared to we cry because we are sad.
Yeah, well, even the studies that have been done on, like the relaxation response and panic disorder, the physiology of the body is certainly very much wrapped up in this, and you can get a feedback loop going.
Sure.
That gets going here. Yeah.
How much of that is associative learning past a certain age?
Right, and of course it's assessed, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If I have thought that by my heart racing means that something bad is about ready to happen, and I think something bad is about ready to happen, and my heart races, and I go, "Oh my God, my heart is racing. That means something really is bad going to happen." You know,
Sure.
I'm just going through a feedback loop. That's
So
not
let's
gonna
apply
be
that to
good.
music. So I believe that music can do things that mimic emotive responses. If you listen to a fast tempo pulse, you will get a physiological response that mimics that, you know, your tempo, your heart tempo wants to match the tempo of a song that you're listening to, which is why you listen to fast tempoed music when you work out as compared to slow tempoed music. You listen to slow tempoed music when you want to relax instead of like thrash metal music. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like your body, your physiological responses can mimic the tempo and prosodic envelopes of the things that you listen to.
Well,
But
strange as it may seem, when I was at Bob Jones University, they did teach me something like that. They taught me that rock and roll music was just going to make me feel horny.
that's
They
fantastic.
probably didn't use that word, did they?
I couldn't help it.
Promiscuous.
Yes,
Promiscuous.
right. Yeah.
Well, actually, that totally reminds me of a great Frank Zappa line, which I wanted to use in my thesis that I was
yeah?
in the process of writing. Frank Zappa said, "Music doesn't make you feel any emotions, because if it did, everybody would be in love, because 98% of songs written are love songs,
Yeah.
right?"
Yeah.
So, but you know. But I kind of abide by the Steven Pinker model of music. Music is just some happy accident that fuses a bunch of things that we were evolutionarily predetermined to enjoy. Kind of like music is the strawberry cheesecake of our ears. Right?
Yeah.
There is no strawberry cheesecake tree, but strawberry cheesecake has these wonderful combination of fats and fruits and sweetness and things that we are just evolved to enjoy. We love fats for very specific reasons, not because it's in cheesecake, but because cheesecake has them. You know, we love sweets for very specific reasons, not because cheesecake has them, but cheesecake happens to have them. You know what I mean? So, you know, music follows a prosodic envelope that's very human-like in the way that it emulates the voice.
Yeah.
And the voice is very emotive, kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher. You know what Charlie Brown's teacher is communicating, even if you don't know what they're saying, because wah 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 wah. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the prosodic envelope, and you can mimic that in music very nicely. Like you know when a melody is angry versus
Right.
beautifully
Well,
mellifluous.
when you listen to even different cultures do different things with music. For example, in Jewish music, sometimes celebration is expressed in a minor key.
Yeah,
And
I
then
noticed
it'll
that.
switch to a major key as the crescendo. And so it uses the movement from minor to major to kind of bring the crescendo to something that's actually celebratory. Whereas in Western music, usually the minor key is for something very depressed.
I always wondered why that was, because I mean,
It's really just totally cultural.
yeah, because I went to temple all the time, being raised Jewish, and I was like, all of this is like, it's very minor, even when it's happy, but then like it'll build up and then it'll end in minor, and I always wondered why.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Interesting.
But in the culture, they didn't question. It's only because you're Western.
The fact that it crescendos and it crescendos in a major key, I think that that's a wonderful example of how music can stir tension and release.
Right.
And tension and release is an aesthetic quality that mimics an emotional quality. And I think that's where people get confused between whether music stimulates emotion versus an aesthetic response.
Right. And of course, it's also true that music, like emotion, stimulates the physiology of the body.
Yes.
And that is perhaps where the feedback and the connection occur.
Mm-hmm.
In the physiological, in the interpretation of the physiological response that we then learn to culturally associate and, as you would perhaps say, learn to assess as indicating certain things that we then behave on. Yeah, awesome. I don't know, Alexa, does this bring anything to your mind in terms of what you might want to say or questions you might ask?
in terms of like Jewish music or any music?
Anything. We're
Anything at
basically
all.
talking about we're actually talking about emotions, and we just use music as an example because of Chris's experience with music therapy in graduate school dealing with emotions.
Okay. I don't know. I
Yeah.
have to keep listening in.
Well, if it comes up, just do it. How about you, Daryl?
Yeah, I had a question. This is a subject I love. I've not done research per se, but we've had a lot of involvement with music over the years. The question that I have though would be: are we talking strictly about music, or are we talking about possibly the combination of music and words, or is that a different subject?
That's a great question.
Because
I would say that we're talking specifically about instrumental music, and at least that's what I'm talking about. Because once you start to impart lyrics, then you're being explicit, right? If you're singing a song that's saying, "I am so sad, I got the blues," that takes away from whatever the music is saying is really supporting what the lyrics are explicitly saying.
It's
So
like leading the
Go ahead.
witness. It's like leading the witness,
Yes.
And so the words, I do think that the words can get in the way. I like it. Now, I used to be at a church. I was the worship director, and sometimes we'd actually write the music for the service, and sometimes I'd actually help write music and arrange music for other people who were just writing songs. And I always tried to find the musical expressions that seem to, in my mind, identify with what the words were, so that I might be able to communicate something like that in the cultural context if the words hadn't been there. And then if I feel like I've accomplished that, then there you go,
Mm-hmm.
But easier said than done. And also, I recognized myself personally that the connections that I was making were culturally very arbitrary, and it all depended on where you were, who you were, whether or not these things worked. For example, I remember there was a song that was going on time in this church, about the heart of God, and I created the song with a very dum 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 bass part, kind of imitating the heartbeat, and really trying to imitate the physicality of that. Now, to a person who didn't like rock and roll music, that bass and the drum doing that would have been irritating because of their association. The music itself does not create that response.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way we've learned to
Praise it.
Right. Yes.
I have a question. I'm guessing you've all experienced this when you're listening to a really good song and it gets to this part. And for me, this is with specific songs. It always happens that you get goosebumps. And it's never, you can't really point out why exactly. Like, you'd be like, oh, that part of that song. It's, goosebumps, one of the causes of it are intense feelings of emotion. Now, what about music and, like, however it's formed at the point you get goosebumps? Like, what is it about it that causes that intense emotion, like, can come from the music and really you can physically see it, reacting.
That's lightning in a bottle, Alexa. I mean, if people were able to predetermine consistently what caused that, record executives would pay big money for that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
They would pay big. That's such a great phenomenon. It's actually been studied. But it's very difficult to study it because there are so many individual differences that account for the goosebump phenomenon.
Yes.
So many different styles of music account for it for different people.
Right.
And sometimes habit can be a part of it. For example, although my theology has radically changed since my fundamentalist days, when I'm present for a choir singing the Hallelujah chorus, there's just something about the music itself that strikes me as just amazing, and I get the goosebump response to that. But there are other songs that I think that do that for me. I tell you, I listen to some of the Beatles music, and even to this day, it's just amazing what that does to me, and the brilliance of it as I experience it. What
actually
song does
experienced
that
with
for you,
some
Alexa?
Beatles music too. Oh well, some Beatles music actually does that for me. But specifically one song that I can even think, even when I think about it, like I think like through the words and lyrics, I'll get goosebumps by the end of it. Have you ever seen Rent, the movie or the show?
Mm-hmm.
It's the reprise of "I'll Cover You" during Angel's funeral.
Okay.
When they're all
Yeah,
singing that, and like then they
Mhm.
break out into scenes. That part, like I not only do I like cry after I get the
Yeah.
goosebumps, but I always like if I don't cry, it's like just all goosebumps through the end. It's just I don't know.
One of the things that hits me is whenever I've watched the movie Toy Story.
Oh my gosh.
There's this one place in it where the girl doll, I can't remember her name.
Jessie?
Perhaps, yeah, maybe Jessie. She's talking about how she was discarded.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I'm watching this movie that is a cartoon about characters that don't even really exist, and this this image is wrenching my heart with this story. It's amazing, and the melody just enhances the experience to the point where it's hard to watch that without bringing tears to your eyes.
Mhm.
Such a sad story.
Yeah, music as a soundtrack has a wonderful effect of bringing about emotions and priming the right emotion, right? The same scene in a movie with a comedic soundtrack versus a dramatic soundtrack will prime you towards a different emotional reaction.
I buy movie soundtracks all the time just because I'll like
cool.
listen. Like I'll kind of remember what was going on in the scene, but it just kind of brings back those emotions, and it's awesome.
A lot of people are totally unaware of just how much music there actually is in some movies. If you listen to, for example, if you put in a video of a movie and leave the room, but turn it up loud enough so you can hear from the other room, you suddenly go, I had no idea there was that much music in this movie.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pivot off the point that music as a stimulus can change our appraisal of something, and that appraisal can change our emotions. I want to pivot off the fact that appraisals can change emotions, and I want to use that as a springboard into talking about the new Ray Comfort movie, because the reason, and here's the thread of continuity, because Ray Comfort has been accused, and it has been demonstrated that he uses crafty editing. I'll try to be as diplomatic as possible. Right? He uses creative editing in such a way to make his opponents kind of look stupid, instead of using arguments that can rest on their own merit in the marketplace of ideas, and he's essentially presenting a perspective that is biasing people who watch his documentaries so that they have an appraisal of the information he's providing, so that they have a specific emotional response.
Right.
Now, Dr. Jones recently posted something on Facebook. And I think that it's awesome that he is bringing this to people's attention. So, let's see. I would like to read a little bit of it, but I want to ask Dr. Jones, are you sitting there?
I am sitting here. I am just enjoying the conversation, following many threads on Facebook.
Okay. Is there something you want to say about what inspired you to post this?
I think that Greg Bray did an excellent job in saying, wow, here's a guy, a theist, I think is the one who wrote it. I thought it was Sean Boatman, one of the guests that we had prior to, that is a few weeks ago, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so I made a mistake in quoting it as if it were him. But another theist actually was simply trying to pontificate an issue here that I thought was really, really nice. And I would like for you to read part of it or just comment on it, because I think that it would be an interesting chat for this particular event tonight.
Okay. Well, he pretty much compares, he says he agrees with the points that Ray Comfort is making, but he completely disagrees with the process with which he makes his points. And he compares Ray Comfort to Michael Moore. right? That's the name of the really
Yeah.
popular documentary maker, Michael Moore.
Right.
So he compares them to him, and he says the primary technique used here is to splice the interviewee's statements into very short segments, 20 to 60 seconds of interaction, that are then played in rapid succession, giving the impression that these people do not have cogent arguments and are quite dense. It is inconceivable that an associate professor or a biologist would not be able to respond to Comfort's material. What this means is that these people graciously permitted themselves to be interviewed, but then Ray Comfort did a hatchet job on them. Now, this is somebody who agrees with Ray Comfort. I'm deeply skeptical about whether Ray Comfort accurately or fairly represented these people. And then he comes down to 3 really interesting points. It comes down to my basic rules of engaging in apologetics. Number 1, godly methods yield godly results. Number 2, never misrepresent other people or their arguments. Number 3, what you win them with, you win them to. So, and then there's a paragraph for each one of those 3 points. I'm just reading the first sentence from them. So he really articulately, and I'm also skipping over paragraphs worth of information here. If you want to go check it out, please go to the Cult of Honesty Facebook page. It's listed right there. It's really articulate, and it's really well thought out. And this is somebody who agrees with the content, just disagrees with the process. So, I don't know. Has anyone here had an opportunity to see the Evolution versus God documentary?
Me.
Okay, I've seen it as well.
I saw it a while back. And not recently enough that I would actually be able to. If you refresh my memory, I go, oh yeah. But I haven't seen it actually in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And of
Dr.
course,
Jones, have you had a chance?
I got to watch the video twice. I was concerned about Ray's use of species. In other words, he did not use a determinate language in order
Kinds.
to deal with species. And so he's not dealing with the concepts of species. He's not being particular. And so this is, in a sense, asking a very ambiguous question to these different professors. And so these guys are looking at it as if, Ray, do you really know what you're talking about when it comes to species? And so I don't think that they're on the same page with him, but he's wanting to ask a question that would require a lot of time to answer, and he wants a quickie. And so that is the premise of that video. It's like, here's a quick question, and I want a quick answer. If you can't do it, theists win. And that's what he got out of the video, and I think it was poorly done. I think it's very, very deceptive, and yet at the same time, people were defending the manner in which he did the video, saying that it was very honest, and I would say that it was very much like what Saiten Bruggencate did and Eric Hovind did on our show. They came in filming yada, yada, yada. They misrepresented what we had said in various ways, and they didn't keep their promises. And I'm assuming, and this is just an assumption, that the same thing was possibly done here. And I've heard other people say that P.Z. Myers really has many complaints about just not keeping him in context.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really think that our culture, in even its news broadcasting, we're losing some of the greater papers. We're losing even some of the good, editors and things like that. We've gotten down to the point where the only news we really get are these little blipping talking points. And we're so used to these little blipping talking points that we think that the depth of every position politically or culturally or socially is somehow reducible to a 20-second talking point. And to me, it's creating an extremely shallow culture that reacts to a lot of this stuff with, if you can get a good talking point, you're convinced. Whoa, that to me is strange and to me difficult to Makes
I
sense.
see it a little differently, Bob. I actually see Ray Comfort coming from a long line of descendants from the Dwayne Gish style of apologetic, where you can fit a lot of bullshit, pardon my language, into a short sentence that makes it very difficult for the person trying to answer that question to unpack it or to answer it in as pithy a manner as the question is asked.
And it's filled with code that the people who already agree with the person understand all the unpacking that might be behind it.
Exactamundo, right?
Yes.
It goes from like Dwayne Gish pretty much to Kent Hovind to Ray Comfort.
Yeah.
That's true. You know, one of the things that I would like to say and encourage theists to do, if you really want creationism to be in the science lab or even in universities being taught, the first thing that you need to do is put it into theory. And unless you put it into scientific theory, it doesn't have any validity that is in the science classroom. What are your thoughts on what I just stated?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but they can't because they already have an a priori belief that they need to, they beg the question. So they need to put it into theory, but that theory can't be falsifiable because they're eventually going to appeal to authority. And the authority they're going to appeal to is going to be supernatural. So they're automatically going to breach the criteria of methodological naturalism.
Right.
So therefore, whatever theory they come up with, it's not going to be a scientific theory because methodological naturalism is a criteria within the scientific method.
Now,
So-
Dr. Hugh Ross, he's an astrophysicist, and he's a brilliant man. He's a theist. He's attempting to put together a model right now that may turn into possibly a theory. I really question his work seriously in certain areas, but at least he's attempting to go in that direction because he doesn't feel, as a scientist, that anything will be respected unless you do put it within a scientific protocol. And so I think that what the creationists are doing, they're trying to bypass scientific protocol and trying to establish a faithism, in a sense, in the classroom.
Well, at least Hugh Ross is an old Earth creationist, so let's set him apart from the young Earth creationists that say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Hugh Ross will debate young Earth creationists and put it in their face that, the speed of light is a constant, and the speed of light, there are galaxies that we see being born, there are stars that we see being born that are millions of light years away, which means that they are millions of years old. And, he has a wonderful ability to argue in a debate form for old universe, deep time version of creation. So his version of creationism almost doesn't bother me. He's essentially arguing for a prime mover and a personal God.
Yeah.
And more power to him. But he's not really pushing for that to be taught in the classroom in a way that like the Kent Hovins are.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Kent Hovind, his whole shtick is wrapped around conspiracy, and you know what I mean.
As if the scientists are trying to pull a fast one.
Not only that, it's like let's see if I can put it linearly. You're not supposed to teach religion in the classroom. Evolution is a religion. You can believe what you want, but don't use my taxpayer money to teach it in the public schools. Right? So that's the Kent Hovind model. That's what he's trying to, that's why he keeps using his code words as you have blind faith in science, that makes it a religion, don't teach religion in public schools, don't use taxpayer money to do it. Right? Hugh Ross is not arguing that.
Do you think that Ray Comfort or Kent Hovind or Eric Hovind or Saitem Brugengate, do you really think that they keep science in its proper context?
I don't think they know what science is.
Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact that Eric doesn't. I don't mean to hog up this conversation, but I know Eric doesn't because he still puts out videos that propagate the views of his father about science being or evolution being a religion, and everything except the Hovind theory. The Hovind theory is no longer accepted even by Eric Hovind.
It's odd that when I read some of this young Earth creationist stuff, and I don't really read a lot of it. In fact, I haven't read any of it in a while. But it, the thing that amazes me is how there's a constant repetition among people within that of just a few scientific facts they're aware of that they feel can be called into question, but they seem to be, for the most part, completely unaware of the vast body of facts that scientists, biologists, geologists, archaeologists are struggling with and dealing with, and trying to come up with theories that are coherent and consistent with it. And they just don't seem to be aware of the tremendous amount of information they're trying to fly in the face of. And so I don't think they even know what they're unaware of what they're actually fighting.
Hmm.
Yeah, even Dr. William Lane Craig, who is a theistic debater, he really made some very sarcastic remarks concerning young Earth creationists, simply because their model is extremely deceptive, that is, concerning the text, that is, the biblical text, and it's extremely dishonest, intellectually dishonest concerning what science is and the practice of. And so, we have rational theists. We have theists all over the place who are not even willing to even acknowledge that kind of theism. And even
Right.
Richard Dawkins, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, he made a quote. He said, all of the cardinals, for the most part, believe in evolution. It
Right.
would be only a handful of priests who actually do, and it's simply because they haven't gone far enough in their educational processes. But the point is, you can't deny the evidence of evolution. And when you have a Ray Comfort who tries to talk about species, he's going to talk about it in a way that he really doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the various concepts, species concepts. He doesn't understand that, Richard Dawkins has even made videos that would answer his question. And,
Hmm.
and it's sad. I mean, why doesn't he approach people who can show how species does turn from one to another, and this is done all the time, and we can see
Yeah.
this through the evolutionary model.
And furthermore, also, where was science at the point of the time that Genesis chapter 1 was written? You can't even begin to argue linguistically that these words were even attempting to encompass the same concepts in any manner whatsoever. In fact, I think that because the scientific community has moved us so far forward, I have serious doubts that we could actually get into the mind of what those words really meant to the original hearers when they heard them, including the vast amount of assumption and error and immaturity of that age in their sense of science, which is certainly not their fault. I mean, science hadn't taken them. So to even try to argue some of these things from the Bible as if it is speaking explicitly and clearly in today's language is to me just outrageously ridiculous.
Yeah, to applaud the Jews for a moment, and I will do so. Their model, that is, of their text, gives the reader the ability to have transition. In other words,
Right.
they don't want to stay stuck in the past. And so they have transitional models to where they can accept the finds of modern science. Unfortunately, Protestantism and Catholicism don't. They're very much involved in a fixed canon, a fixed belief, and this is not where the Jews are. And so what we have seen over, the centuries, we've seen Protestants and Catholics alike talking about a text that they're not even familiar with in a very, very deceptive manner. And that's
And the
why
way that works even in their theology is there is an assumption within both Catholic and Protestant models that the Bible has revealed to us all the truth that we will ever have revealed to us. We might grow an understanding of it, but there is all the truth right there already. And that's not the way that the Jews seem to understand the text.
I think my biggest argument concerning Ray Comfort, I think that he is one who spends Jesus in a way that he has never been. In other words, all of the renderings that he takes and tries to spin as the gospel, etc., I think are very spurious. I think that he's one who doesn't understand anything about the gospel or the New Testament read itself. I think that he's abysmally ignorant in that context. But I think that he's playing a game of being a Protestant trying to play with the veiled mental language of theology. But I seriously don't think that he knows anything about the historical Jesus in any sense of the word.
He's trying to play games with the unveiled explicit language of science. What are you talking about? He can't even get the basics right.
Yeah, you could take some of the redneck jokes and kind of convert them into Ray Comfort jokes. One of my favorite is, if you are looking at the diaper package and you think that 35 pounds is a reference to its capacity, you might be a Ray Comfort disciple. But I've only watched a few Ray Comfort videos, and I don't know. I'm a college professor. I don't understand who thinks these things make sense. I can't identify with them. I'm not in that culture. I don't walk in that. So I have a hard time understanding how he ever got so popular. I don't get it.
I think that it has to do. Oh, what were you going to say?
Okay, I just wanted to input. He became popular because he's the guy that goes out on the street and he will ask people questions like this. Have you ever told a lie? And the person will say, yes. What does that make you? A liar. Have you ever stolen a piece of bubble gum? What does that make you? A thief. And so yada, yada, yada. When you stand before God in the final judgment, and you're a liar, you're a thief, yada, 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 how is God going to judge you? Therefore, you're going to hell unless you accept sweet Jesus. And so it's, he's made his living off of trapping people in these nonsensical mindsets of theology. And it's sad. And I can't imagine getting saved in that kind of context, but unfortunately I have to confess, I was saved years ago when I was 4 years old because I felt wicked, and I did walk the aisle and get saved down at an old-fashioned altar, and I gave my heart and life to sweet Jesus. And since then, I've rejected the whole ball of wax.
Alexa, you were about ready to say something as well.
Oh, I was going to say, it's like, I've seen, actually, I don't know why, but for some reason I found it entertaining. I've seen a lot of the Ray Comfort videos. I've seen a lot of them where he's interviewing people, and I could basically repeat his entire, game, where he'll be like, do you think you're a good person? And usually he'll be like, yeah, I'm a good person. And so let me ask you a question. How many lies have you told in your life? And even if you've told one lie, that automatically makes you a liar. But, obviously we're, human beings, we tell all these lies. So he backs you into a corner. He's like, have you ever stared at a woman with lust in your heart? Or, to the women, have you ever stared with a man? Because he assumes everyone's straight when he asks these questions. And then at the end, he's like, so by your own admission, you're a lying, stealing, blasphemer, and adulterer at heart. If you were to stand before God today, on Judgment Day, where do you think he'd send you, heaven or hell? And then,
This also
The next Ray Comfort.
yeah, well, this also is part of that, and this is true of both, I think, Catholic, Eastern, and Western Orthodoxy and Protestants. There's this concept that I don't think they've ever demonstrated to be realistic, that somehow because you did something, that somehow forms your identity.
Yeah.
Where does this come from? The fact that I may have told a lie yesterday means that that I am the fact that I am the person who told that lie, I am a liar. But if I'm going to call myself a liar as if this is somehow the essence of my identity and the character that I now possess eternally hereafter, that is absolutely absurd. There's just, I don't see, where do they make this connection? And if you ever took a drink once, you're an alcoholic.
It's like if you light something on fire once, you're an arson. Exactly. Like if you smoke a cigarette once, you're a smoker.
And this also comes from what I would call a very obtuse and extreme version of morality. For example, I'll tell you what. I don't think that lying is always wrong. In fact, I think that some people need to earn the right to hear the truth from you. I'm not suggesting that we should therefore just willy-nilly feel free to deceive people. But, we live in a culture and a society where sometimes we have to negotiate the risks. And, I don't think that people are always entitled to the truth they seek, because they're not necessarily, if you can't trust that they're going to handle the response to it, I don't think you have to necessarily out and out lie to them necessarily. And I think that sometimes we can deceive people for the purposes of our own personal gain. I think that's wonderful to call that into question. But there's this, what I would call an extreme sense of the morality that is used to just, if you've ever told, and of course, even the original so-called one of those commandments is thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor, which is not quite the same thing as lying.
Daryl, I haven't been hearing from you tonight. You're sitting back. Why don't you plug in?
Well, I've been kind of wrestling with my connection a lot of the time, but I finally, I think, settled into a good connection.
I think he's speaking in tongues right now. Bob, do you have the interpretation?
Am I speaking in tongues, or did you
Yeah,
say?
you used to be in the Pentecostal movement, Daryl. Now, come on, speak a little bit further, and we'll give you an interpretation. Or Christopher will. He's good.
You'll just have to bear with me, okay? And someone will need to interpret. No, I was listening to what Bob was saying, and I can identify with the mindset, because and I understand where Ray Comfort's coming from in his position, even though I disagree, and in reality it doesn't make sense, and it's what you're saying about it, Bob, is obviously true, but it's as if, like, let's say you tell a lie, or you steal some little insignificant something or other, or any of these things. Those are like the indicators that tell you who you really are. And I've seen it in my experience. I've seen it promoted to the degree that it takes people and actually entraps them.
Yes.
Because they buy into it, they believe it, and they fight it and they resist it until the point of where they trust it.
What, that last sentence was disappearing on us. Say that again, Daryl, if you can.
Well, they end up thrusting themselves into one of these things that it's as if they've been restraining themselves and fighting it, and then before you know it, I mean, I've met a lot, for example, of ex-Pentecostals that fought it so long, and then they just give up and just dive into whatever, because they feel like they've been convinced that's who they are, that's what they are.
Yeah.
And so it actually works in the opposite of what it's supposed to. You know, all these people that get saved under this kind of misinformation and are being kept in the future, because they feel like, okay, now I'm saved, I've accepted Jesus, and here I have, I've told another lie.
Yeah.
So,
we can bring this back even some ways to what Christopher was saying earlier about music and emotions in music. And that is that, the way I understand behavior is people do what they think they need to do in a way that makes sense to them at the time they do it. And in a way that they think is going to produce an outcome they see as favorable. There's a sense in which behavior itself is a fruit of the perspective at the time. Now, it's true that may be your perspective. It's true that it may be the way that you are making sense of things. It may be true that this is the behavior you find workable and acceptable. But where does that become who you are? To me, that, if you had a different understanding, if you had a different perspective, if you had a different history, a different development, you'd be having a different behavior, but it could still be the same you. What if you've been born in a different time? Wouldn't you in some ways be becoming a person who is presenting in a different way? But I don't see that the way we present.
Wouldn't that be the true you? At those moments when you have to act reflexively, and you don't have time to put on the Chris show, in my case.
I think that's a more authentic expression of yourself, but I think that the true you is in some ways, and I don't mean this in the Steven Pinker manner. I mean this, that the true you is the blank slate that is you, filled with all of its predispositions. Not a total blank slate like Steven Pinker wrote a book about the blank slate, but that who and what you are thrown at these things is who you are, and being thrown at these things is producing now a outworking of your wrestling with these things. But that's the outworking of your wrestling with these things. That's not you. And so as a result, I mean, when you know somebody who's been through a tremendous amount of violence and abuse, and then they come out of the ghetto and they become a thief and a bank robber, is this the real them? Or is this what happens to a human being who goes through this kind of a development? This is not them. This is the outcome of their organism having gone through these experiences, arriving at these conclusions, and therefore embracing these behaviors.
So it almost sounds like you're saying they're making the best choices they can based on the limited options available to them.
And many of them immature and horrible and awful. And had they had other options available to them, they would have definitely made different choices. And so there's a sense in which the way it's worked out is really simply the outworking of the events they're participating in and were thrown into, and they're doing the best they can with it, all things considered. And so I don't see this as really being a part of identity. Personally, I don't know.
That really makes a lot of sense. I think you remember the show that we did with a gentleman. He was incarcerated for 20 plus years, spent 364 days in the hole. It was a horrible situation. And one of the things that he admitted to is exactly what you're talking about. He didn't know what his options were, but now, after coming out of prison, and he actually lived with us for a couple of years. And I remember the first Christmas, he couldn't even approach us and sit at the table with us because, that was foreign. He was used to institutional style living. He couldn't even be around, social atmospheres, etc.
There was a sense in which it was a violation of his internal sense of ethics to allow himself to be in a place he was unworthy of, which in a sense showed that there was at least an apparatus that was attempting to act morally, but with a very screwed up concept of how that works out in the context.
Yeah, and this is, in my opinion, where allowing Christians in the institutions to preach and teach their rhetoric really hurts these people that are incarcerated. And it doesn't give them a real sense of who they are. It doesn't give them a real sense of, why they made the choices that they make. And so it's not a healing process for them. It's simply getting saved, and hopefully they will get their ticket to heaven. And that kind of rhetoric. And it's once again, the church world is extremely hurtful and harmful, even to those people who are in prison. It sounds like they're doing good, but these people are led in the wrong direction by these kind of theists.
There's a form of non-Euclidean mathematics that would define parallel lines as lines that are a particular distance apart at a certain point and meet at infinity. It's just a different system of math, and it works, as another mathematical system. But if we were going to, in any manner, tie our identity to our behavior, how about this? Why isn't our identity the behavior we are working ourselves toward, the behavior we will have in the future as a result of our constant ongoing learning and moving forward? Why isn't that our identity? And
I'd rather our behavior be our identity than our thoughts.
Yeah, and yet, but the behavior that we're working towards, I mean, the way I even think and behave today is radically different than the way I did 30 years ago. And and I would imagine that as I grow in insight and wisdom and care and all these things, that I will continue to evolve in the kind of behavior I choose. So, seeing as that's my trajectory, I would rather my identity be even settled, if it's going to be settled on behavior at all, in the person I am becoming, not the person I have been.
Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, we've all made mistakes, and nobody's more sensitive to our mistakes than ourselves.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and hopefully we have commitments that we achieve, or that we strive to achieve, and that we value, and or we have values that we commit to, I should say, and that is who we project who we are.
And a psychological truth here that is true is that we tend to emulate behavior that responds to that which we focus upon. That which we focus upon becomes a stimulus to ongoing behavior. This concept that I am the identity of past behavior is actually the dynamic that keeps me in that behavior. It contributes a huge part of it. And to me, some of this theology is a way of trying to keep sinners forever sinners, so that we can forever keep them in need of Jesus, as it were. And it becomes a cyclical. I didn't, notice that pun there. It's awful. To me, it's and I don't think that the people using this are conscious of this being the deliberate strategy of this particular approach, but I do think it's nonetheless the outcome of such an approach.
Most cases, in most paradigms, is extremely harmful for people.
Absolutely, psychologically and emotionally and to their well-being, absolutely harmful.
Yeah. I think this kind of show needs to be done over and over again to get it out to the masses. People really don't realize how much harm it is to have all of these evangelists going into our institutions in various platforms, etc. And this really bothers me, and it needs to be changed. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Daryl. You were getting ready to get involved in the conversation. Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a question. I think it might be rather interesting. If we were to take the things that we've been talking about most recently and apply them to Ray Comfort and such the like, I think of what Bob was saying about, what we have to work with, so to speak, mentally, and in his mind, I'm sure that he feels like he's doing a good thing in what he does, or at least I would expect so. And then on the other hand, he's actually doing the very thing that he's opposing, because in my estimation, and I think all would agree here, that every time he tells a person such a thing, that, you're a liar, and, you're going to stand before God, give account, and you're going to end up in hell. That's all lies.
Yeah. It's
and so
almost
he's doing the very thing that he's opposing, and as far as I can tell, he's completely unaware.
Right. It reminds me of the words attributed to Jesus on the cross, where he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Yeah. It's almost as if, and I get the impression, and I wanted to clarify this, that as much as I see Christianity as harmful, I really don't identify Jesus personally with this movement called Christianity. I don't. I really don't. I see Jesus as really, and sometimes there's things he said that I think he was mocking religion, not embracing it.
Exactly.
And then they murdered him because of the way he was just so upsetting the system. I don't think Jesus ever intended to create this institution that has followed him. And there's a great deal of nonsense that this doesn't make me any less of, say, a person who admires or looks to Jesus, but you know, the damage of Christian theology and of its looking back to the past. That, and I think that Ray Comfort's approach, and I've seen those videos where he does that, that is built entirely upon people's gullibility to embrace such a model that if you've ever told a liar, or if you've ever told a lie, that makes you a liar. No, it doesn't. It means that at the moment in time, you are the person telling the lie, and that makes you a liar in terms of identifying who the one is who told the lie. But it doesn't. It's not as if that's your essence.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well, his whole swing in the new videos. I mean, I actually I actually wrote a couple of the questions that he asks down as he was asking them. And you can tell what the bias is on the new video. So his first couple of questions are you an atheist? Why are you an atheist? Do you believe in evolution? Do you think evolution is a belief? When did you start believing? And then he asks what your major is, because most of the people he's asking are students. Can you give me some observable evidence that evolution is true? You know, something I don't have to take on faith. So these words that he's using are all like
He's
belief.
making a transition. He is creating the illusion that just wow.
And
He
listen,
can't be doing that without knowing exactly what he's doing.
These are well-crafted questions.
That sounds to me too deliberate.
Let me just get these next two questions in
Yeah.
because they're butter. They're so good. Can you give me an example of one kind changing to another? And then finally, so you have faith in experts. So those are a couple
And
of
the
the
students
questions
will
from
say
the
yes.
new movie.
Well, I'm glad
Oh,
that
yeah.
went. I'm glad that went in this direction, because when you first got started, for a moment there, I thought that Chris was going to try to lead me to Jesus.
Hey, guys, we're out of time.
Concerned about that.
We are out of time, unfortunately. I've enjoyed tonight. I would love to hear Daryl speak in tongues as Christopher was playing the bass guitar. I think it would go, hand in hand, and it would be awesome. And Bob could put in some riffs with the
Sure,
lead
why
guitar,
not?
and
Yeah.
it would be awesome. It's been
Yeah.
wonderful having you guys tonight on the Hangout. Each one of you guys need to give a final comment. Alexa, you first.
I guess in general, I think, and this is, I think Ray Comfort needs to stop doing what he's doing, and I think he knows exactly what he's doing, and I think it's harmful, both psychologically and like emotionally, making people feel guilty for being human beings, and believing in something based on like just those premises that he's giving them and nothing else. He's really just like shoving this information down people's throats, and I think it's horrible. That's my last word.
Daryl.
Daryl.
I can agree that that's a horrible thing. I think that people believe it, and that's why they do it. And it reminds me of what we find so much of in the Old Testament. Everybody running around saying, God told me to do this, and I'm doing this in the name of God, and all the killings, all the horrible things that went on. And to me, in some sense, it's somewhat of a continuation of that. It's kind of the same system, similar God.
Christopher.
I think it's people like Ray Comfort and conversations like the kind that we had at the beginning of this show, and the kind of topics that Bob was talking about in his show that convinced me more and more about the importance of mindfulness, about the kind of stimuli that we're receiving all the time, and how we don't have to fuse with the emotional reactions that the stimulus that surround us always stimulate. Sometimes we can change our appraisals, and if we're in a bad mood, the stimuli surrounding us don't have to agitate us more so. We can change our appraisal and see the good things. And I'll just leave it at that.
That's good. Bob.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit disappointed that Daryl's connection wasn't good enough that we could have gotten some more of his participation. really happy to see Alexa again, and thank you for coming back. Good to see you. And I think that Christopher was mentioning a few things about emotion in music that I don't think I was quite getting as much of what he was saying, but I get the impression that there's something really worth exploring more deeply. I think he's got some things to say on this that may be different from what things I'm saying, and I would really like to see that get explored at some point in the future. The last thing. Yes, exactly. But I'll tell you, one thing that I find, as we've talked about it, this is, there was a day when I agreed with Ray Comfort. There was a day when I was a fundamentalist, and I can't identify with that. And I'll tell you what, although there was, if Ray Comfort asked me, did you ever behave like a fundamentalist? Well, then you're a fundamentalist. It ain't so.
That's why you don't want your past behavior to determine your present personality.
Yeah, someone asked me, have I ever believed in God? I would say yes at one point. It's like, then I'm a theist. It's like, whoa. Like,
exactly. Yeah. So, be who you are. And I'll tell you what, none of us really know who we are. This is an explorative, we're discovering it. And it can be challenging. It can be disappointing. It can be frightening, but whatever it is, find people who love you, find people who respect you, learn to love and respect yourself, and let's discover all this stuff.
It can be wonderful.
It can be, and I think if we're honest with each other and kind and loving, that it will be for more and more people.
Well, we are out of time. This has been the Cult of Honesty, and this is the place where people can actually be honest. And it's nice to have our panelists tonight, and we encourage you to get involved in the Hangout, because this is the place where you can share what you think to be true. And so, until next time, thank you for your time.